2024, June 19th, I'm going to share with you some little tidbits of our gathering here today. Juneteenth serves as a reminder, a celebration of freedom granted African American people, reminding us of one of the most horrific displays of hatred, bigotry imposed on African American people. Historically, Juneteenth has been an overlooked event in our nation's history. For over 400 years, more than 50 million men and women and children were victims of the tragic slave trade, one of the darkest chapters in human history. Juneteenth was birthed out of and fueled by civil rights leaders, activists like Harriet Tubman and the controversial Nat Turner, Thurgood Marshall, known then as Mr. Civil Rights, Shirley Chisholm and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and Charlotte L. Brown, an African American educator and civil rights activist. Charlotte Brown was one of the first to legally challenge racial segregation in the United States. When she filed a successful lawsuit against the omnibus streetcar company in San Francisco in the 1860s. Charlotte Brown was on her way to her doctor on a horse-drawn streetcar, 1 block away from her home, when the conductor approached her and asked her to leave her seat. Charlotte said, "I have a right to ride, and I had no intentions of leaving the car." She was then forcibly removed from her seat. 2 years after persistence, she won a trial, and 2 weeks later, she was ejected again from the same company and won a second judgment against the streetcar company. Her persistence led to additional challenges to segregation in San Francisco. It took 30 years for California to enact legislation to make segregation on streetcars illegal statewide. Charlotte Brown, Harriet Tubman, Nat Turner, Thurgood Marshall, Dr. Martin Luther King, Shirley Chisholm, and please not let us ever neglect the fact that there were also whites who fought against slavery, racism, and segregation, like Victoria Foster Durr. In the mid-1900s, a housewife and political activist from Birmingham, Alabama, who fought against poll tax and Southern white men domination. Also, John Watts Warren, who was a federal judge in the late 1800s from Charleston, South Carolina. He opened white primaries to black voters. They all, like so many other, pioneered in the change for slavery and segregation in these United States. So, the first Juneteenth, history states, on June 19th, 1865, nearly 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln emancipated enslaved African Americans, Union troops arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas, with news of freedom. More than 250,000 Africans embraced freedom by executive decree in which became known as Freedom Day. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. It involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former slave owners and former slaves. And this relationship between them then became employer and hired laborer. Education was a critical first step for nearly 4 million newly freed African Americans to become self-sufficient. Between 1861 and the 1900s, more than 90 institutions of higher education were founded for African Americans. But still, it wasn't until May 17, 1954, that the U.S. Supreme Court outlawed racial segregation in public schools. It was a unanimous ruling that ended the 5-year case of Oliver Brown versus the Board of Education in Topeka, Tennessee. June 19th, this National Day of Independence was just recently signed into law in the East Room of the White House by President Biden on June 17th, 2021. Inspired by the activism of Miss Opal Lee. She was a dedicated pioneer, a determined African American. She has been described as the grandmother of Juneteenth. Her relentless efforts to push forward and to establish Juneteenth as a federal holiday, marking it the 12th legal federal holiday of the United States, and only the second federal holiday recognizing the struggles of African Americans since the passing of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's Day, signed in 1983. Juneteenth is meant to be a symbolic interpretation of providing a better understanding of the evolution of our nation for all people. Juneteenth celebration, Freedom Day then and now, I believe, for this nation must always stand as a reminder of the ongoing fight for human rights and equality, not only as a celebration of the achievements of African Americans in these United States, but as a goal for all people to strive for the preservation of liberty that are under assault in the world at large, especially in our nation. November elections are rapidly approaching, my brothers and sisters. Where will you stand? In this historic narrative of June 19th, that promoted racial and personal achievement for all since Freedom Day, known now as June 19th. Where do you stand in this continual struggle? Are you free or bound? Are you free or yet bound? The powerful orator Frederick Douglass gave a keynote address at an Independence Day celebration on July 5th, 1852, and asked, What to the slave is the 4th of July? His speech was given at a commemorating signing event of the Declaration of Independence, held at Corinth Hall in Rochester, New York. It was one of his most poignant, scathed speeches in which Frederick Douglass stated, "This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I mourn." Frederick Douglass says, I quote, "I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not inclined within the pale of glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you and not by me. The sunset that brought light and health to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You rejoice, I mourn." End quote. Frederick Douglass challenged the schism of the depth of the divide between America's founding principles and the institution of slavery. Frederick Douglass commended the nation's founders, stating that they were great men for their ideas of freedom, but he also spotlighted the hypocrisy of their ideas by the existence of slavery then on America's soil. And America today, a similar question: what is the significance of Juneteenth to the African American community? Former President Barack Obama stated, and I quote, "Juneteenth has never been a celebration of victory or an acceptance of the way things are. Instead, it is a celebration of progress. It is an affirmation that despite the most painful past or parts of our history, things get better. America can change." End quote. So Juneteenth, yes, was a beginning for our ancestors in finding their way in a society that was not created for African Americans to thrive. The Emancipation Proclamation was not enough to shift the deeply rooted paradigm of racism in which slavery was built. Blood, sweat, and tears were shed in the fight for our fundamental human rights and freedom. In America, my brothers and my people have seen far too many dark days, and still systematic racism continues to plague our nation. Juneteenth is truly not about t-shirts with pictures of iconic civil rights leaders or cookouts with banners or line dancing. Juneteenth is a reminder of a scarred people these United States shall never forget. It is not just a celebration of freedom of slaves in our past, but also a reminder for a continued work of all people, of all races, of all ethnicities, to maintain and secure a better and brighter tomorrow. In closing, I say to you, to me, to people of my color, Jesus said, "Love one another as you would have them love you. Treat others as you would have them treat you. And then he came back around and he said, love others as I have loved you, in spite of yourselves. Love. So Juneteenth, a celebration and a reminder. God bless you and thank you.